And thank you all for being here. I prepared a long lecture, quite a few pages, but I thought that it would be much more interesting for you to hear how this peace process that we're about to end, hopefully, was made, how the details of how it started. So I will leave this to you. I will simply read the conclusion, which is a good resume of what I wanted to say. It says, leadership is about doing our best effort to make better the life of our people. Leadership is about doing whatever you have to do to end the war, any war. Leadership is about taking risks to do what you believe in your own heart is the right thing to do. In the end, if perhaps you walk away with one idea, is that responsible leadership in today's world is about being pragmatic, being able to combine ideas from the left or the right to help create prosperity for citizens and the foundations of a peaceful society. So you could read the conference later on. And let me tell you simply how this peace process, which is the only peace process in the world that today has any high probability of being successful. We have in the world 22 armed conflicts going on, 22. And this is the only one that might be solved through a peaceful and political negotiation. And it's the oldest, longest, and the only armed conflict in the whole of the Western Hemisphere. Why did I start, and how did this start? I've been studying peace processes for many years, and when I discovered that you need a set of conditions. Why has so many attempts to negotiate peace with the FARC have failed? And studying peace processes around the world and the peace processes with the FARC that many other presidents attempted, well, I discovered that there were a certain set of conditions that were not present and that were present at the beginning of my government. The first one is that you need the correlation of military forces, military correlation of forces to be in the favor of the state. If the guerrillas have in their favor the correlation of military forces, well, there's no real possibility of negotiating peace with them. We managed to change this correlation of forces in our favor, and when I assumed the government, this was a reality. A second condition in today's world is that you need the support of the international community and the support of the region where you are trying to negotiate a conflict. This condition was not present before. This condition was not present when I came into power, but I very rapidly created that condition by negotiating and normalizing my relations, the relations of Colombia with our neighbors, with Venezuela, with Ecuador, with Latin America in general. And we managed to have this sort of international backing. And the third condition that is needed in any peace process is that you need the commanders of the insurgency to realize that for them personally, it's a better business. It's more profitable to negotiate peace than continue the war. This again was not present before, and it became a reality in the recent past when we start hitting what we call high-value targets, which were the commanders of the FARC. Personally, we started to go after them personally and with a certain degree of effectiveness. So these three conditions that were not present before were present at the beginning of the process. And when I realized that we had the conditions, I took the step to start the process. At that time, I called some people who had had real experience in peace processes in different parts of the world. One of them is a good friend of Mr. Coatsworth, Shlomo Ben-Ami, former Minister of Foreign Relations of Israel. He was one of the architects of the Camp David Agreement between Palestine and Israel. I brought in a British called Jonathan Powell, who was the Chief of Staff of Tony Blair. He had been instrumental in the negotiations with the IRA. I brought in Joaquin Villalobos. He was a commander of the Salvadorian guerrillas and chief negotiator in the Salvadorian peace process. I brought in the academy, professor of Harvard, William Ury, who was in a way the successor of a great professor in Harvard called Roger Fisher, who developed very good and effective theories about negotiating. So I called them and I said, why don't you help me take each step here in this process, plan the process correctly, and they have been extremely, extremely helpful since the very beginning. I remember one of them saying, you must put a condition. Nothing is agreed until everything is agreed. And he explained why. He said, negotiating a peace process is never popular. It's much easier, and I can prove that now that I've been in both sides. It's much easier to lead and to be in government in times of war than to lead in times of peace. It's much easier to make war than to make peace. To make war is very popular. You simply have to, if you win, of course, because if you lose, it's not very popular. But if you're winning, you just show the trophies to the public, and the public will all applaud, and you rally the forces, and you continue. And I did that for when I was Minister of Defense before being President. That's why I'm President. I became very popular Foreign Minister, Defense Minister, and the people elected me as President. But making peace is about changing the way people think, about changing people who have suffered in the war, and teach them to forgive, teach them to the power of and the necessity to reconcile. And so you need to lead in a different way. Leading in times of war is very vertical. Leading in times of peace or in a peace process is very horizontal. You have to, it's like when you have simultaneous chess games. You have to address different issues at a different time. And the mere fact, I remember Shlomo and the others saying, the mere fact that you're going to sit down with your enemies will be questioned, because there's always there's a group of people who say, no, you have to crush them. You have to kill every one of them until the last one Oh, so the mere fact that you are going to sit with them is going to make you unpopular. But when you start negotiating and start talking about benefits to the guerrilla, then you will become even more unpopular. Because people will say, why is the president talking about giving them any benefits? These people have only kidnapped, made all kinds of violent, atrocious acts, terrorism. Why should they get any benefits? And so it is very unpopular. So what they advised me is try to keep the negotiation secret and tell the guerrillas that nothing is agreed until everything is agreed, and only when you have the final package you can put it to the people, and then they will decide. So we started with that condition. Nothing is agreed until everything is agreed, and the agreement must be secret until we finish. We also, and I was also advised, and we did that, more than 50% of any peace negotiation is the agenda. The agenda is crucial. And try to negotiate the agenda before you launch the process publicly. And this is also a way to measure the real intention of the FARC. If they this time really think they want peace, they will abide by the rules and they will keep the negotiation confidential. If they're in the same game as they have played before, have taken advantage of the negotiation, they will leak. They will not respect the confidentiality. So I told them, you want to negotiate peace, make it absolutely confidential. And we negotiated the agenda, 5 points in the agenda, and they never leaked anything, which for me was important proof that they were well-intentioned, that this time it was for real. Another very difficult decision that I had to take was, should I negotiate in the middle of the war, or should I accept a bilateral ceasefire? The FARC, the guerrillas, were pressing very much for a bilateral ceasefire. But the experiences we had in previous attempts with bilateral ceasefires had not been very positive. The FARC had been very good at taking advantage of the bilateral ceasefire to rearm, to get some oxygen, to strengthen themselves, both militarily and politically. So I said, no ceasefire. Another reason why I did not accept a ceasefire was, you will permit the FARC to be in the best of all worlds. They will be armed, they will be discussing with no military pressure. So there is a perverse incentive to prolong the negotiations forever. So I took this decision to fight and talk at the same time. And I used the former Prime Minister of Israel, Rabin, who used a phrase when he was negotiating with Arafat. He said, I will negotiate peace with these terrorists as if there is no terrorism in my country. But I will go after terrorism in my country as if there is no peace negotiations where they were held, where they were discussing. And I used a similar phrase, and I started the peace talks in the middle of the war. Then my advisor said, this is the most difficult and the most costly for you politically, because the people will give you the benefit of the doubt for some time, but they will get tired of seeing a fundamental contradiction. They're seeing a peace process on the one hand, and the president talking about this peace process, but they're seeing war on the other hand. And then they're going to start questioning your credibility, your truthfulness, and this is going to cost you politically. But it's the most effective way and the shortest to get to your port of destiny. So I said, let's go and take the step and take the shortest step. That's how it started. We negotiated 5 points in the agenda. One has to do with rural development. The second has to do with political participation. The third has to do with drug trafficking. This is an especially important point. I insisted very much to put on the table on the negotiation this item of this subject, because drug trafficking in Colombia has been the source of finance of every violent group that we have had in the last 30 to 40 years. All our violent groups, and we have had and we still have many, are related one way or another to drug trafficking. We are the #1 exporter, we still are, of cocaine to the world. And the FARC has been the military operation that has defended drug trafficking, and they have made it impossible for the military forces to eradicate drug trafficking from Colombia. And so to convince them to switch sides, in a sense, and help us do away, because they have always said that they are not drug traffickers. They say they benefit from drug trafficking, they finance themselves with drug trafficking, but they are not drug traffickers. They say they don't get rich themselves, they finance their military operations with drug money. So I insisted to put this item in the agenda, and the other item was, the other two subjects in the agenda were victims, the rights of the victims, the right to justice, to the truth, to reparations, and no repetition. These are the rights that are included in what today is called the transitional justice, which is a new sort of international law concept to facilitate peace processes around the world. And it's under the umbrella of the Treaty of Rome. The International Criminal Court has to do with this transitional court, and we decided, and I decided, to put the victims, for the first time ever, any country has ever done this, to put the victims in the center of the solution of this conflict and their rights. Because we have had so many victims, more than 7.5 million victims, because it's been such a long conflict, more than 50 years, that I thought it would give much more credibility and much more legitimacy to put the victims in the center of the solution. And the fifth point is what you call DDR. This is sort of standard procedure in any peace process. What is DDR? It's demobilization, disarmament, and the R stands for reintegration of the armed group into civil society. And so those were the 5 points in the agenda. We started negotiating the first one, the second one. I'm not going to go into the details. I'm only going to say we negotiate something that is completely sensible. We didn't give away our economic model or our investment policy. We negotiated something that we had to do regardless of the FARC. With or without FARC, we have to invest more in the rural areas. We have to invest more in public goods in the rural areas. We have to give more access to the peasants to the land, and we have to give them the technical and financial help for them to become productive. It's something that we had to do anyways. And in the political participation, what we negotiated was what any democracy does every now and then to be able to maintain the democracy. Democracy is full of faults. That's why Churchill used to say it's the worst of all systems, except any other system. And so you have to continue revising the democracies as in any institution. You have to accommodate yourself to changing circumstances. That's what we're doing, giving more rights to the opposition, giving more rights to peoples or regions that have not had enough representation in our Congress or in our centers of decision, and that's what we negotiated. In the drug trafficking, we negotiated virtually that the FARC will help us now in the illegal crop substitution and in doing away with drug trafficking in Colombia. And just imagine for 30 seconds what this means for New York, for the US, for Mexico, for Central America, or for London or Madrid, where the consumption of drugs is going up. That the #1 exporter of cocaine is going to be able for the first time to really address the issue of the exportation and production of drugs, of cocaine in the world. And we have been negotiating the 4th item. We already negotiated the right to truth. We negotiated a truth commission. The reparations is almost finished. We start repairing victims even before this conflict was over. We have repaired already, the Colombian state, more than 500,000 victims at a very high cost. People ask me, why did you do that? Why did you start repairing victims before the conflict was over? And I said, because we need to start healing the wounds of this war as soon as possible. Otherwise, this tremendous effort to reconcile would be very difficult. And so we started even before we ended the conflict. And the breakthrough that we managed to get last week in Havana, in Cuba, is the item of justice, which is the most difficult item in any peace process. The most difficult negotiation has to do with justice. Where do you draw the line between peace and justice? If you ask a victim, a normal victim, they will always say, this line has to be more towards justice. I want more justice. If you ask a future victim, where do you want the line drawn? They will always say, no, I want more peace because I don't want to be a future victim. So it's a negotiation that, in this case, we had to take into account our international obligations, the fact that we become and we're a part of the Treaty of Rome, our legal obligations internationally, our legal obligations nationally. We have a constitution which, for example, forbids amnesties as we've seen them before. We have to take into account international public opinion. We have to take into account Colombian public opinion, and at the same time strike a deal that is acceptable to the FARC. So to square that circle was very difficult, and was the most difficult item in the whole negotiation, and that's what we achieved last week. We managed to create a system, a transitional justice system with a tribunal, where the most responsible, because you can't try everything, every member of the FARC, this would simply physically impossible. But you get the most responsible, and they go through a process where they are investigated, they are judged by a special tribunal, they are then condemned and sentenced. So they go through the transitional justice system, so there is no impunity. And this conforms by far with the international standards. And that was a major breakthrough that we achieved last week, because the FARC had resisted. They said, with good arguments, why should we be the first guerrilla group in the history of the world that we're going to lay down our arms and be sentenced? Oh, so why lay down our arms? We had to explain to them that if they wanted to really participate in politics, they had to do, and they had to go through a justice system, because that's the new way, the new rules of the game in today's world. Well, we were able to achieve that last week. What is left? The DDR, where I put, for the first time also, 5 generals of my army, 1 admiral, in active service, to be the ones who negotiate that. How is the bilateral ceasefire going to be implemented? How is the FARC going to disarm? And how are they going to be reincorporated into civil and normal life? This is what is left. We also imposed on ourselves a deadline. It has to be over by, at the latest, 6 months from now, the 23rd of March. So we have to hurry up. If we are able to finish, and I'm sure we will, then Colombia will have peace for the first time in 51 years.